So tonight we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to step away from the fab work. Been doing a lot of fab work, fabricating the seats, mounts, you know, getting all that stuff, cleaning up the floor, welding the floor, doing all that. So tonight I think what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be kind of start doing almost, if you want, like a health check on this thing. Now that the car is actually running, you know, I've noticed it has troubles doing things. It idles very rough, runs very rough. It smells crazy rich. If I put on, usually if I touch my accelerator here, you know, do anything with this, it has a tendency to leak out from the bottom here, so I want to fix that. You know, I can basically sometimes just tap that and the squirters will squirt. So I mean, there's just a lot of things going. The other thing I noticed when the car is running, there's no temperature gauge, and well, there's a temperature gauge, but there's nothing on the temperature itself. And so that leads me to believe that something's going on with the temperature sensor. And on small block Chevys, if you see, here's that little brass plug right there. That's generally normally where the temperature sensor probe will go. And because I don't see it, then I'm not sure what's going on there. And the other thing that I noticed was that there is no oil sending, or the gauge is in the car, but there isn't anything to report what the temperature or what the pressure is. And if you can see right down in here, this little silver tip thing, I'm not sure what they put in there. There should typically also be a oil pressure sender in there. So I know for a fact that those two things are missing out of this car. So I know it needs a coolant sensor, and I know it needs an oil temp, or the oil pressure sensor. You can see, if you look down at the bottom there, you can see it's wet because that's where gas is basically comes out from the carb. So what I'm going to be doing is pulling the carb off, pulling the distributor cap off, probably pulling the distributor out because I want to check the health on that, pulling the plugs, and getting that all stuff put on the bench so that I can see where it's at. You know, I was looking at the plugs, and you know, they're looking a little old, and you know, when I've been working on these things, they've also sort of seemed to be different lengths and types. So what I'll do, I'll get you guys set up on a tripod so you guys can kind of see the work that I'll be doing, and we'll go from there. So then that I've taken the carb off, I've actually kind of been doing some looking. And what I found is that right down in here, right down in this spot, is where my coolant temp sensor actually is. So the car does have one, it's just not hooked up. So just got to figure out where to get that hooked up, and then I will be able to have that back in the car. Some tape over the port just to make sure nothing gets down inside. Okay, so now that we got the carb off, I'm going to pull the distributor. Before I do that, I need to pull the plug wires. So pull those off. Distributor is quite loose. I've never even tightened it and it already spun like that, so it leads me to believe that somebody was already in here monkeying around. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me considering the shape this is in. Well, the cap doesn't seem to be in too bad a shape. The button is pretty worn. You can see inside there's some markings on them, but I wouldn't say that this cap is that old. The button's a little dirty, so we'll see about that. So again, you can see it's a little dirty, but it's not too bad. Could be better. The tip's got a little discoloration on it here. It's a little black, but again, I mean, it's not in horrible shape. I was expecting to look a lot worse. Now, I know that some of you will notice and see what I'm doing, and then you'll be like, well, why aren't you marking top dead center or doing any of that? Well, to be honest, everything is coming out, so for me, it's no big deal because I'm going to be resetting timing and doing all of that work, so I'm not really concerned. It's pretty gross. It's got a lot of buildup on it, nothing really major. You can see moisture has been in here at some point. It's a little crusty. It's nice to see that the distributor hasn't been locked out, so that's a good sign. It does look like it's a fairly original one, but I'm not too concerned. So one of the things I plan to do is that to help with timing, there's a gap in here. I don't know if you can really see that. And if you notice how much it does this, what I'm going to do is you can get a spacer and a shim kit to shim this out so it's a lot tighter, and then this way it's not floating so much down on the bottom when your cam is going around. I've also noticed that for whatever reason, they got the harness grounded to the intake manifold here. So I'll probably change that out and move it to the firewalls. There's a ground spot right here. So I'm not sure why they did that. Put some tape over top of that hole. So because this car at some point in its past life was, I'm going to assume throttle body, it's got a mess of wiring all over this thing that at some point I'll need to go through. Like, I got two plugs here, which I have no idea what they go to. I've got two wires here, which I don't know where they go to. I got another plug here. I got something up here. So there's going to be some time spent sort of going through this to kind of see what's going on. It's just that for now, I just want to get this thing up and running properly. So I got the distributor out, I got the carburetor off. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the plugs and I'm going to take a look at the plugs and see what condition they're in. And I'm thinking it might be a little difficult, but we'll see. Doing spark plugs can become real fun. So now that I have them off, I have the spark plugs as 1 and then going down the line, and then 2 and going down the line. And you can see just how black these plugs are. And standing here and smelling them, they are horribly, horribly, horribly rich. So that tells me one of two things. One, carb needs to be adjusted. The carb needs to be adjusted and fixed, which I already knew. And 2, it needs new plugs. So I know now I'm going to need some stuff for the distributor, I'm going to need some stuff for the carburetor, and I'm going to need new plugs at a minimum so far. So that's a start. Just want to pull a valve cover here quickly. Not always a big fan of disturbing valve cover gaskets because they can have a tendency to be seated fine, and then when you decide to start monkeying around, they may have a tendency to leak. So hopefully these ones aren't too bad of shape and they won't leak on me. All right, let's see what it looks like underneath here. It's not too bad. It smells a lot like a lot of fuel going through there. But what's nice to see is that for the most part, the rockers are pretty clean. No heavy deposits on it, so that's good to see. So I figure this thing will just need a good oil change at some point. But while I'm in here, what I was curious about is what heads are on this thing. Looks like 3300545. According to Google, they're from around 1973 and 76 cc chambers with 202 and 160 valves. If that's good, I don't know. I'll have to look that up later and see what people say. It looks like they may also be off a 73 vet, so who knows, but now I know the heads. And looking underneath, it doesn't look too bad. They are the old cork gaskets, so I will, and they're weeping underneath, so I will put down a new set of valve cover gaskets on the list. I mean, you can even see underneath the valve cover, it's actually pretty clean and there's not much in there. So even the baffle is pretty clean. So either this has been changed out or it's been maintained pretty good. But I'm gonna get some new valve cover gaskets regardless. So just put a couple bolts in here just to hold this back. So overall, looking at it, I would say that it's in good shape. Nothing really stands out bad to me. I gotta do some electrical wiring. I gotta figure out how to get, that looks like the oil pressure plug there. So that's still in the car. Curious if I can see possibly. I don't see any wiring harness for the coolant sensor, so I may have to see if it comes out of the harness somewhere and deal with that one. So I'm not sure where that is. Okay, so one of the big reasons why I wanted to do this tonight is I'm curious about this carburetor. So when it was on the car, I was noticing that there was no control of over the rear float. So I don't know if there's a rear float in this or if something is going on there. So that's one thing I need to look at. I need to empty the fuel out. Nope. Okay, so that's not going to work. Okay, so we're just going to pull the pulls and just let it allow itself to make a mess everywhere. Before we do that, let's take off the fuel rail. Let's see, what size do we need for that? 11/16 will work. And no, I didn't use a good cookie sheet for this. I actually bought one specifically for doing this, especially when you're dealing with the carbs, because gas is always coming out everywhere no matter how hard you try not to. Okay, so now take this front bowl off. Some nice little sticky crusties of gas on that one. Same on this one. Gross crusties. This works well, but I do know that this seal or this gasket that's under here, it is leaking a bit, so that will have to get investigated and looked at. Take the rear bowl off. Okay, so strangely, well, the front one had a brass one. This one does have one, but oh man, you should see the brown inside this. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Not sure where that's all coming from, but that's why I'm taking it apart for. Even the tray down here is all covered in gross, disgusting silt and dirt. All right, so some of the things to me that felt kind of off was just how rich this thing was running. And I have no idea the history on this or where it was. So it looks like, so I don't know how well it will show up, but down inside here is a couple of the vents for air, for idle and stuff, and the front side is a little off and the back side is really off, so that will have to be, or will need to be adjusted properly. So now let's take a look. We'll pull off these front jets and see if maybe there's a number or anything on them to let me know what they are. So it looks like the front, it's kind of hard to tell, but it looks like, I would say 68. Yeah, I think the fronts are 68. Yeah, so I'm going to say, based off the spec, they say their primary main jets are supposed to be 68. So that is a good sign, because that does tell me, at least I know that for the front so far, the jets have not been changed. So that's a good sign. So now I want to pull off, which seems to be pretty stuck on here. Checking the power valve. I don't see any distinguishable numbers on it. Oh, looks like 45 maybe? Yeah, so I'm gonna say the front is a 45 power valve. I don't know, let's see. Yep. Okay, so based off of looking at the front of this, based off of what it shows within the specs for this carb, this is considered a quick fuel Q50 carburetor, and the front jets are the same, the power valve is the same, so to me nothing has been changed on this. Now with that said, if I can't get this thing running well, I may end up having to change out the power valves or stuff like that. But at this point, I'm not too worried about it, because I was wondering if anything had ever been done to this, but according to this, nothing has been done to this. And so for some reason, the float was just being weird on the back, because it says 76, I think, for the rear jets. Yep, 76. So this carburetor has never been touched. It basically got bought and then stuck on, and that was that. The secondary one is just, it's fixed, non-adjustable. Okay, so it now takes me back to why. So you can see that this is the front one, and it's brass, which, I mean, whatever. I don't know if you guys can see that in the bottom, it's all like gross. So it goes to show you that it's been sitting, or that it was sitting at some point for a while. The bowl is actually slightly rusty. I don't know if I'll be able to. Straight up crusty brie. Looks like fuel was sitting in here for a while at some point in time. Okay. Okay, so that all moves free and clear. Okay, so put this back in. So you can see on this one, when I reseat the float, if I turn the float handle, you can see that there's adjustment in there. It'll move that float up and down. So I know on the front bowl, the float is fine. The back bowl was the one that seemed to not be working properly. So let's pull the needle and seat out on this one first. So you can see, if you look inside the little hole right here, you can see it moves freely. So there's nothing wrong there. So you can see in this one, if I do the same thing, you can see that the bowl does, or the float does not move. So there's no float adjustment on this one. So that's where I got to figure out what's going on with this now. Two screws inside, takes the float off. So apparently trying to deal with these floats makes it very difficult. It's spring loaded, very tight spot. It's tough to get your fingers down in there. Okay. Okay, so after looking over this, the needle and seat still do not work properly. So I don't know if it's a bowl issue or a float type issue or something going on with the float itself. So what I want to do, I'm going to pull the front one off again. And I'm going to take out the float on this one. What I want to check is that on the floats themselves, there's a little spot that allows the needle and seat to touch and then allow it to move up and down. If you take a look on this one, you can see the bump right here, and that's where that needle and seat goes. And so when you adjust that, it moves this up and down, or it basically makes this stop. And if you look at this one, you can see it's got that same bump, but I'm not sure, because it's metal, I have a feeling what's going on is that it's not adjusted properly, so that when it's installed, it's not allowing it to hit properly, which doesn't allow it to be adjusted properly. So what we need to do is just find something just to kind of slide under, and we can just kind of push it up. We'll just make a small adjustment here. That looks about even. We'll reinstall this. There might be a spec somewhere that says how much gap you want there, but I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it that far. I just kind of decided to take it apart and just do a quick gander at this tonight. So if we put that back in, you can see it just basically falls on itself. See? And now, because I pushed that bump up, now you can see that, like the other side, the float is now working. So I have a feeling that they probably replaced the float in this thing, and they didn't realize that you had to make that adjustment. So then basically what was happening is that there was no float adjustment, and it was filling the bowl as full as it wanted to fill it. And of course that's not going to be good. So I'm not sure where sort of a marking point for this is going to be. So I'm just going to kind of leave it there for now, and then I can put this bowl back on. Before I do that, let's take a look at this gasket. And the reason I'm doing this for is because the fuel was sitting for so long with it being so high. I just want to make sure that, that there's no tears or anything like that. This one looks fine. I don't see any issues with it. I don't see any cracks. It's a little dry. It should be a little more soft. So I mean, that could be looked at. But otherwise, I'm not too concerned about it right now. The arm still works fine, no issues there. So we'll just put this one back together. Rear fuel bowl is back into a condition of which I am happy with, aside from just needing to finalize the float level, but I can do that once the car is back up and running. But for now, it does allow me to make sure that I can adjust the floats and get those set properly. And now that I have the floats working properly, the other thing that I can do that I haven't done yet is it's always good to know what your fuel pressure is on these cars, especially for carbureted. I mean, it's important for fuel injected, but carbureted especially. If you run too high fuel pressure, you can wreck the bowls or the gaskets and stuff like that. So what I've done is I've picked up this 3 to 15 PSI pressure gauge, and that will go into the port over on the fuel rail once I get that back up and going. Okay, metering blocks on. Float bowl is on. And always got to make sure when you're putting these back on that your little lever right here goes back underneath here, so that when this gets depressed, it presses down on that for you. So I'm not really sure what these little black things are for. It looks like it's almost like a locating pin or something. They do go straight through and they do go into the bowl, but I'm not sure what their function is. I'll have to look that up and see what their intended purpose is. Now it does call, and some people say to mark this at about 14 thou, but apparently doesn't take much space. I guess it doesn't help if I have it sitting on something that makes it be pushed up, so it would have been way out of whack even if I had wanted it not to be out of whack. Alright, let's try this again. Now that it's actually up off something. Okay, so that one is set to 13 as I don't have a 14. And we'll work on this one. Let's see where this one's at. And it's pretty close, but needs just a hair of an adjustment. Good there. Okay, so those are adjusted. So now if I do this, so I got something sticking over here. All right, I don't know what was causing it to stick, but it's unstuck. So I'm gonna say that the carburetor is better. It's not great. I'll have to check the floats, do a few other small adjustments to it, little tweaks to it. But for that, you know, I think for now, I'll leave it as it is. I gotta order some stuff for the car, so I gotta order some distributor parts, some spark plugs, some valve cover gaskets, and a few other things. I'll get those on order, and once they get in, what I'll probably do is I'll make it like a kind of like a two-part series. Part one will be this, just how I kind of went over everything, and part two will be doing the reinstall of everything, spark plugs, distributor. I might make one specifically or separately on the distributor, on the things that I was, you know, talking about with the shimming. I'm going to have to change out the vacuum can because it's not adjustable, so I want to have that as well. So for the distributor, I need a shim kit, an adjustable can. For the carburetor, I'm going to say I just need a power valve. We'll see on that. Car valve covers, gaskets, spark plugs, and a few other odds and ends. And once I get those in, I'll create another video and go from there. If you guys have any questions, thoughts, or want to know anything, just let me know. I'll do my best to help you guys out. And until then, we'll see you next time.